Hello everybody, Nathan here once again with another video on using Blender for creating Minetest assets. This video, I kind of did half of it off camera. I made this complete and utter garbage of a kangaroo, and I really dislike how it looks, and I think it's just complete garbage, which is why I did not save any of the video of creating this. I was trying to do it all with squares, and it looks like complete garbage. I will probably at some point make one for my Desert Life mod, but it'll not be cubic based. It'll be a normal, just low poly mesh like I've done for most of my animals. But I had all this modeled, and I was going to do a two-part video with the second part talking about rigging and everything. And I thought, you know what, I've got the rig made. Let's do the video on rigging anyways, and we'll just skip the entire bit about making this model because this model is complete garbage. So that's what we're doing right now. I'm in pose mode here. Turn X around so we can see everything. He only has, it's a she technically because she has a Joey in her pouch. It's not in this model, but on the reference picture I was using, there was a Joey. But I've kind of laid out a bone system here, and let me actually pull up this image here in Google Chrome from World Book. Miriam Pal, I don't know how to pronounce that, but evidently they made this picture. And it's always a good idea to kind of have a reference image if you're making an animal as to how the animal looks in real life and how its bones work, because it's kind of important that you have a semi-anatomically correct image, you know? So here what we have is the hip joint back here. This would then be the knee, and this is like the heel and the foot. So kind of similar to, you know, a person's legs. You got your hips, your knees, your leg, and then your foot. So we have that same bone system set up here on the kangaroo. And then its body kind of pivots at its hip joint here. So when it bends forward, this is where most of its body's bending is. I mean, the backbone does do some bending, obviously, but it has some bending going on in the hip too. And when it bends at the hip, obviously the tail then lifts up. Or when it stands up straighter, the tip kind of pushes into the ground more. So that's just important to kind of know how the skeletal system works on the mob you're trying to make. So I kind of referenced that. You'll notice I got some bones here that are different colors, and I got some lines going between bones, and yeah, all sorts of crazy stuff here. So let's start with the basics, which is the bones. This is our master bone here. Notice that craziness? Yep, we'll get to that later. But we move this and everything moves. I did not connect the mesh to the bones because I didn't think that was going to work well. She has the head here. Let me go ahead and change this to local rotation, so we're rotating things properly. So there's its head moving. It's got two little arms here, which were just as one chunk, so they always kind of moved together. It's got its tail here. I guess I should be doing it that way. A little teeny bit of a bone there. And whoa, what is this, sorcery? Whoa, that's so insane. 2 bones moving when I'm moving only 1. Well, I did a video recently on using constraints to animate train wheels and like the pistons and everything. It's the same kind of thing here for the bones, but I wanted to kind of demo it and stuff. So we're moving this one, and there's no bone constraints on this one, but this teal colored one is actually the one that has the constraint, which is why it's that teal color. And basically all I'm doing here is copying the rotation of this bone with an offset. So I'm going to go ahead and create it all over. So you'll notice here, this looks pretty messed up. So let's kind of fix that like that. Okay. We're going to add a bone constraint, and we are going to copy rotation. We need a target object. Well, the object's going to be kangaroo, because that is what I named this bone system. And the bone is going to be lower body, I believe. Yes. And you'll notice it immediately rotated this bone to match up to the other one's X, Y, and Z rotation. Well, looking here at our two little arrows, we'll see Z's up and down, Y's back and forth. So the only one we need to copy is X, because that's rotation in a circle this way. So we'll turn off the copying of those two. And we don't really want them both showing the exact same rotation, because that just is silly. So we'll turn on an offset. And that'll let us rotate this back to more or less the right position, right there. And now when we rotate the lower body, it rotates the upper. But it uses whatever degree offset it is. That's not really a 90-degree offset, because 90 would be more like that. But it's whatever this degree is, that offset. And it just uses that offset when it calculates the rotation. So it kind of bends the whole body together. And we still can individually animate this portion. But like if we want to have his whole body bend, her whole body, whatever, its whole body bend, we just use the lower one to rotate it forward. And then if we want to rotate that up a little bit, we can maybe move the head, tweak its little arms here, you know, and then of course Alt-R will clear out any rotation on all of this, which also clears out the offset. So if I put that to there and then Alt-R, this is with 0 rotation. So keep that in mind. You probably don't want to clear the rotation of the upper portion, because it will kind of mess things up. So you got to keep that in mind. But that's what we're doing here. We're just copying the rotation and then using an offset on it. There's really no reason to use that on any other parts of the skeletal system here. So we're not. But on this, because this is kind of where its body pivots, it seems to be a good point to go ahead and set one up. And obviously on other things you're making, you may want to have something where maybe you're making something with 8 legs and you only want to animate 4 of the legs. You could use copy rotation and get the other legs animated with only animating half of them, and the other 4 would be automatic. Now the other thing I did here, which you kind of noticed when I was doing this, is I set up some craziness for this foot. I mean, look at that. It breaks every now and then, only because it has to. But that foot pretty much stays on the ground. And I can move it around and stretch it out, and that foot will stay on the ground until I lift it up. So that's kind of cool. It keeps the feet from going into the ground. So how did we do that? Well, I got this little bone here, and this bone is actually doing 2 things. It has a floor constraint on it, which is set to a target item of floor, which is this large plane that you probably didn't know existed because you couldn't tell it was there. It's invisible. But now it's completely visible. Invisible. Invisible. Completely visible. Okay. I'm probably doing that a little too much. But that's the floor. The foot will not go through the floor unless it cannot stretch any higher. And it goes up, but only till it gets to its rest position, at which point it disconnects. But yeah, it stays on the floor, and while it moves, it stays on the floor. So you can animate the kangaroo doing all sorts of crazy stuff, but keeping its feet on the ground. Kind of weird. Probably not a whole lot of reason to do it, but the reason I set this up was because I wanted to do this. Yep, this leg pretty much animates itself. All we have to do is move this one bone and the whole leg system moves. Now how does that work? Well, that's an inverse kinematic, or as it's abbreviated here, an IK. And what that's doing is we have a target again, which is kangaroo, which is the bone system. And then we have a bone, which is foot left IK, which is this little bone right here that does not deform any mesh, not that any of this does, but when set up this would not deform any of the mesh. It only provides a control for these other bones. And we have a tail, and we stretch, and we have a chain length of 2. If I set chain length to 1, and I move this bone, all I affect is the bone right above it. And if I set the length up to 3, well, then we get all sorts of insane, crazy stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and set that back to 2. And that'll fix everything. So what this allows us to do is maybe we want to make this kangaroo walk. So because of the way walking works, we don't actually move the mob itself. We just move its legs. Because otherwise, you know, it'd animate and it's moving it in the map. And if you move it in the space here, its movements can be all crazy. So when you animate walking, it stays in the same spot and just its legs move. And it might have some tail animations going on and some head animations and maybe front legs kind of rotating around a little bit and stuff. Maybe a little bit of up and down bobbing kind of action. But you're not going to have forward and reverse motion because that's just going to end up looking really weird when it gets animated in Minetest. So keep that in mind. You don't want to move your mesh. You just want to move its legs and it'll create the illusion that it's walking when it moves. And no, the animation never matches up perfectly. That's just the sad reality of video games. They're not real life. So yeah, the setup's really, really simple here. That's all we do. Just target and then a bone to control it. And then the chain length. And that's pretty much it. We have a weight, which I always leave on, but you could turn off, I guess. Basically, that would just affect how strongly it works. You said it's 50%. You'd have to move this up twice as high for that to move half the height. Essentially is how that would work. So I'm going to go ahead and change to my little grabby thing. You'll notice I can't slide this foot back and forth when it's on the ground. So I have to pick it up off the ground before I can slide it. Which is actually a good thing, because when a kangaroo, or anything actually, has its foot on the ground, that foot should not move back and forth side to side anywhere. It is on the ground, it should stay stationary. It should only be able to move when it is in the air. So let's go ahead and make a little stepping animation here. So we're going to go ahead and insert a keyframe for a location. And we're going to insert a rotation for the foot. So that's our first frame. And we're just going to go up 10 frames. Just cause. And we are going to lift this foot into the air. And now we're going to want to rotate this so the toes are kind of dragging behind. And we will go ahead and insert a location and insert a rotation. And we're using the I key on the keyboard to pull up the animation menu. So you'll notice here, foot starts there. It kind of rotates down before the foot even pulls up. But that's all right. We can fix that by changing the Z value here to 0. Actually, I don't think it's using the Z. This motion is going on. Okay, that's kind of weird. But let's try that again. We're going to set a location here now. And let's see how that animates out. It doesn't seem to move until 4 frames in. And I'm not really sure why that is. Is it because it's... No, because sticky just means I can't slide it when it's on the ground plane. Should I do an offset? Nope. This is not something I've played with too much. So, this is kind of my first time using it, honestly. But there we go. Its foot kind of moves into the air. Alright, that's good. But we kind of want... Optimally, we would have another leg that would kind of run on the exact opposite sequence, but I only made one leg here, so we're just going to work with one leg. Also, if you're doing walk animations, it's good to find a video of the real walk animation. If you just do walk cycle, you can usually find a lot of really good references. So like I could do kangaroo walk cycle, and I will probably find... here we go. Thumb plate. There is... Somebody went through and they made hundreds and hundreds of image sequences of different animals' walkings. Like here we have a person's walk cycle. I guess kangaroo didn't really have the best of results, but a lot of animals you will find have it. Ostriches do. I used that when I made my ostrich animation, but this I guess is our best bet. So here it's walking on all four legs instead of hopping around. It's kind of hopping in these lower frames. This isn't really the best because this contrast is horrible, but it's kind of good to see how they actually walk. This one looks totally jacked. I can't tell what's going on here. I'm sure if I searched a little more, I could find something that would be much better that we could actually use, but seeing as how this is just a garbage mesh, and I'm not going to be using it for anything real, I don't feel like exerting that much energy into finding it. So we have the foot lifting up. Excellent. And the foot gets to 20, and what do we want the foot doing now? Well, now the foot is going to move back and down some, and we're going to go ahead and kind of set the foot straight out and set a rotation on that and a location on this. So the foot kind of comes up, the foot moves backwards, which is wrong. The foot should move forward because it needs to move forward where it can take its next step. So we're going to scoot the foot forward and rotate that foot so it's a little straighter. And we'll set our rotation and location again. It's lifting its foot up. It's moving its foot forward. Well, some of that lifting should already be going in the forward motion. So let's go ahead and push this foot forward a little bit here and insert a location on that. And let's see how that looks now. Steps forward, moves its foot. All right, that's working. And then let's go ahead and put the foot back to the ground. But before we do that, we should actually make sure this foot is about where it was on the first frame, which I can go ahead and do Alt-G, and that'll clear the location. Is that where the foot started? There's an easy way to find out. If I just click in the middle of that, it'll set my 3D cursor there. And then I can go ahead and Alt-G. I think I did Alt-G. See, it's not the same location, but I can manually move it till it's about the same place. And then we will insert the location on that. And let's go ahead and clear rotation on the foot and then insert a rotation keyframe. So now it kind of lifts its foot up. It moves forward. And the foot comes back and rests back on the ground in the exact same position where it started. If we go ahead and set the end frame of my animation there, it kind of does the same walking cycle over and over. Now, we optimally would want actually to have 40 frames or more, because this foot should stay on the ground while the other foot's doing the exact same animation. Because obviously one foot needs to be on the ground at all times, unless it was hopping. So this is kind of a rough walk cycle. Could use a lot more polish and stuff. You know, maybe we should have a little bit of body movement going on while he's walking. So let's go ahead and set some of that up. Let's see. Just taking a step up. So maybe the body should move upward a little bit. Let's go ahead and set a location there. Go to frame 10. And we'll move this up just a little bit. And you'll notice that that moves up the foot as well. So we'll have to move that down a little bit to compensate. And then we'll go ahead and set a location and set a location. So the whole body kind of moves up as it takes that step. Frame 20, nothing happens. Frame 30, the foot's back on the ground. So frame 20, we are going to go ahead and set a location. And then frame 30, we will clear the movement with Alt-G and set a location keyframe. So the body kind of moves a little bit there. And let's watch how this looks. The body moves a little bit. All right, not bad. Of course, with a second leg on the other side, your body movement would be a little different because you have two legs that are moving up and down, so the body potentially should be wiggling a little more. But okay, but that's a basic walk. That's good. Let's go ahead to frame 50. And let's set a keyframe for the location of the body. Let's go ahead and set our start frame to 50, which actually I can't do without first setting the aim frame to something higher. So we'll set that to 100, set the start frame to 50. Now when we play the animation cycle, we don't get any animation because there's nothing animated within these keys, which is what we want. We're going to do a jump now. So, foot stays on the ground, right? Foot doesn't stay on the ground. That's a problem. Pull foot underground. Foot stays on the ground. So even though the foot stays here, we can pull it below ground, and you'll notice the X location is moving here. If I set that to 0, it puts it a little bit above ground. It stops at about 0.03 is about where it stops. So if we just drag it below that, that lets us pull the body, and that straightens the leg out to that point. That leg's kind of bent kind of weird, I feel like, for a kangaroo to be jumping. So let's go ahead and clear that location, and actually we'll just do this and insert a location there. So we want to make the kangaroo jump, right? Well, let's pull his foot underground and set another location. So its foot will stay underground or on the ground. And let's just go ahead to frame 70 and pull the kangaroo up into the air. And we can go this far, that far, before the legs catch. So let's keep going a little higher so he's into the air. And actually, you know what? Let me just grab that one so it just goes straight up. Alright, so we'll say that's good. Into the location. I feel like this foot should maybe be flexed a little differently. So let's pull it back. Insert a location there. And let's go ahead and insert toe rotation on the toes so they are just still hitting the ground. And let's see what happens here. Alright, we got a problem. I didn't set the toes rotation beforehand. So we get some really funky stuff going on here. Let's go ahead and set the rotation on that and set the location on this. Let's see what happens here. Goes in the air, sticky keeps it on the ground. That's where our problem is. It's in sticky. Sticky is keeping that bone where it's at. So it jumps to the air and then its foot moves back all crazy. Like that, which I don't really like. So if I turn sticky off, it can jump, but it pushes its foot all over the ground, which is not optimal. So how do we fix that? Well, let's put this back here. So it's moving about, I'm going to say 2 spaces. So I'm going to keep that there, put this here, and let's just move the body 2 spaces forward. Insert a location, and then we want to delete that keyframe with Alt-I. It now jumps forward, and let's get this foot in the right spot. It jumps forward, and its leg kicks forward for absolutely no apparent reason. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't have any keyframes. And that's just a rotation. What is going on? It has a keyframe there. That is literally the only keyframe it has. I'm assuming it's doing that because of the IK rig. And it wants to keep that foot on the ground in that position. Okay, well that's messed up. So what we'll do instead is put this back where it was. And watch the jump. Jump goes up. Foot bends unnaturally. But I guess we'll leave it that way. And we'll compensate by bending the body. And we'll insert a rotation on that. And you know what? I should have inserted a rotation on the first frame then. So now it jumps up and kind of rotates its body back. And then it needs to land. And pretty much go back. But landing is more than just the reversing of jumping, because they both operate very, very differently. We're going to want to have it squished down a little further. Alt-G to clear the rotation. I'm going to pull it down a bit further than it needs to be, and insert the location. And we're going to go ahead and bend the body, and bend it a little further forward than its rotation should be. Alt-R, and then we'll set the rotation there. Alt-G, and set the location there. So it jumps up, hits the ground, its body bends a little low, and then straightens itself back up. That might be a little much too low. Pull it up just a little bit. There's a lot of tweaking and playing around you gotta do. Do that just a little bit less there. Right, so on the ground, jumps to the air, comes back down. Just momentum and the force of its mass pulling it down pulls the bones a little lower, and then its muscles kick in and straightens itself back up to its at-rest position. Animation is a huge, huge, huge thing. Okay, there is absolutely no way I could possibly ever cover all of the animation secrets and everything that you need to know to be a good animator. And trust me, I am not that great of an animator. I know the basics, I know some of the theories and stuff, but yeah, I would not venture to call myself the best animator by any stretch. So we're going to call this little jump here good. And then, you know, we're going to do one last animation, and these will all be available in the blend file that'll be available for download, so you can mess around with this and see everything. What we're going to do is do a little feeding animation. So we'll start at 110, and these are kind of the three animations. Well, there should really be an attack animation, but maybe the kangaroos just, they jump away and they run away from you. So you should have like a walking, there should be an attack, and then you want an idle, which could just be standing around kind of, you know, twitching its ears if it has ears, kind of bobbing in the body, wiggling the arms, whatever. An idle, or a lot of times, I personally, the idle, I use it as an eating, because there's not a specific animation subset for eating with 10+1's mobs redo mod. If you're using a different mod for doing your mobs, and it has an animation for eating, well, you would want to have something separate for that and your idle. But let's just do an eating animation. So we set a rotation at the rest position here. Let's go up to, say, 115, or 125 rather. We're going to rotate this down to about that. I think I'm going to pull the body a little bit forward. So I'm going to want to set a location for that, and I'm going to want to set rotation on the head, and I meant to hit R, or not R, I. And we'll set a rotation on both of these arms. Alright, so frame 125, let's do this. Okay, body tilted forward, head tilted down, one arm back, one arm forward a little bit. Go ahead and set rotation keyframes on all these. Oh, and you know what? Let's rotate the tail downward. I did not set a tail rotation at the first frame. Alt-R to clear the rotation, and then we are in business. You can actually use the up and down arrow keys to jump from one keyframe to the next, and the left and right will do singles. I just felt like I should throw that out there. And let's kind of pull it forward. Pretty much the ankle here is where its mass should stay balanced. So, yeah, you kind of want, I mean, doing something like that, it's going to look a little weird because there's no way it could balance. Doing something like this, honestly, wouldn't necessarily look weird. And maybe when a kangaroo eats, it does actually kind of slip back on its legs, not forward. I honestly have no idea. But now that I mentioned it, I kind of feel like it probably goes back on its legs rather than forward. So let's see how this looks. Here he is at rest. kind of slides its body back as it bends forward. I don't notice that head moving. It rotates, but not enough. So we're going to go ahead and put some more rotation on that. All right, let's see. It would work better if there was actually some mesh connected to this. It's still not nearly close enough to the ground, though. So what do? Do we push it lower? No, that would just look really weird because its knee would be way above its body. So we can do some more rotation here at the hip. And that should really be on the keyframe. So we'll do some more rotation there. Insert rotation. Straighten this tail out to keep some balance on the ground. Rotation. Should I move the body? I don't know. Honestly, I feel like the body maybe should just stay in the same spot. Again, if I had a video to... I don't know why I inserted a rotation on that. I wanted to insert a location. You can always undo with Control Z, or if there's just a specific, like you want to get rid of the location keyframe, Alt-I will clear it, and you can hit I and set an insert a keyframe for your location. You can do the same thing for rotation, scale, and Alt-I over them will clear those. That might be a good eating animation. So we'll just do that, and we'll go to frame 140, and let's clear all this stuff out. So Alt-G on that, insert location, Alt-R on that portion, insert rotation, Alt-R there, insert rotation. Nope, want to Alt-R, insert rotation, and that's all we do. We're just clearing off all the rotations we just set up, and then inserting a rotation back to the at-rest keyframe. And it now kind of has this little eating animation where its body kind of moves a little bit. I noticed the foot here rotates some. So let's go ahead and set a... Whoops. Don't need a location on that. I wanted a rotation. And 125. Honestly, I didn't pay enough attention on the first. It's below. The ball is just a little bit below that line. So I'm going to go ahead and select something else that has an animation keyframe there. And then we'll select back to the foot, rotate that. That looks about right, I think. Rotation, and then up to the last frame, and then we'll go ahead and clear out the rotation, insert rotation, and somehow that is messed up. Because its rotation was not cleared at the first frame. That's why. Alright, so let's set a rotation there. And then go ahead and delete that, and now its foot goes upward. Arrgh. Okay, well, let's set that back to there. Set rotation, and then at 140 now it's going to be too low, so we will clear the rotation and insert a rotation, and it tweaks a little bit down. So let's rotate it just a touch up. And that's good enough. This isn't like Disney Pixar we're trying to make. Honestly, this is much too fast though. Like, there should be something of it on the ground. Don't worry though, that was intentional. So I can show you how to fix it. Let's switch over to the animation tab. And you'll notice we have all this crazy stuff and all this crazy stuff. We're just worried about this crazy stuff here. Let's hit the home key on the keyboard. So we'll pull everything out. And let's go ahead and select all the bones. And now we are showing all of the keyframes and the animations for every single bone on this kangaroo. So let's go to frame 125. And we'll scroll out to zoom out a little bit. And let's hit the B key. And let's select everything there. And okay, well, we can make the, if we hit the control key, we can shove it out that way. Now it bends down really low, but it still comes right back up. Okay, so that's not what we want to do. So let's select everything on that exact keyframe, Shift D to duplicate it, hold down the control key and move it to the right. Let's do 10 frames. 10, come on. Nope, 10. Okay. So now it goes down and it stays down 10 frames, but now it comes back up in 5 frames, which is really much too quick. So let's go ahead and select all of the keyframes on that, and let's move those by 10, which I guess I'm zoomed out too far and can only move by 20. And I can still only move by 20. Okay, well that's alright. Let's hit the G key to grab, and then X, and then we'll just manually enter 10. And now it moved it by 10 keyframes. So we have a slow bend down, it stays down, and then it comes back up. We might want to do a little tweak at frame 135. Let's tweak the head just a little bit. Some rotation there. Maybe move the arms a little bit, just so we have a little bit more action going on. And yeah, let's do that. Okay. So it bends forward, kind of wiggles its arm and its head a little bit, and then it goes back. Boom. Perfect eating animation. Obviously, it's not perfect, but it's the example. That's what we're going for here, peoples. Alright, so there everything is. I'm going to go ahead and set this back to the default layout, and I'm going to turn this onto object mode. Save the file, which you guys can download and mess around with. Maybe learn something. I hope. Hopefully I'm a good enough teacher where you can learn something from this complete scatterbrain. But this is going to wrap up. I don't know what this video will be called, but it's going to wrap up this video. And yeah, if there are specific topics about Blender you'd like me to cover, please let me know in the comments or on my website, and I will try to do that for you, assuming I know enough about it where I can cover the topic. And that's going to wrap it up. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.